How was Shell, one of the world's largest oil companies, able to take control of Nigeria? Many of you may be aware of the impact of the oil industry in Nigeria, but few may understand the extent of the control that foreign companies, specifically Shell, have over the country's resources and economy. Let's go to the beginning of Shell. In 1833, a businessman named Marcus Samuel decided to expand his London antique shop. Seashells were all the rage back then, so he started to import and sell them from the Far East. When Marcus Samuel died, his two sons Marcus Jr. and Samuel took over during a trip to the Caucasus. In 1890, the region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea connecting Europe and Asia. The two brothers came to realize the huge potential of the oil markets, so they wasted no time and started to restructure their business. They renamed it to the Shell Transport and Trading Company due to their father's passion for seashells. So now we got the quick history out the way. Now we can look at the initial steps that a company like Shell would take in order to target a foreign nation. Finding more oil reserves is a difficult task, as many countries are protective of their resources. To overcome this, companies may look for oil-rich countries that are also economically poor. These countries may lack the necessary skills or infrastructure to extract their own oil, making them more willing to partner with foreign companies. However, another important factor to consider is the level of corruption in the country, as it can make it easier to bribe and manipulate officials and exploit the population. This is what happened in Nigeria in the 1950s, when a foreign company took advantage of the country's resources and the corruption of its government, causing harm to the Nigerian people. Nigeria, with its vast oil reserves, was the perfect target for Shell. But how does a company like Shell go about taking control of a foreign nation? The answer is by gaining influence over the government and military. This can be done through force, but it is much easier and more effective to do so through money. By offering investments, jobs, and promises of development, the company can secure the support of the government and military, making it easier to control the country's resources. In the case of Nigeria, Shell offered to develop the country's oil extraction infrastructure, promising jobs and foreign investment. At first, this seemed like a great deal for the Nigerian government, as it would bring much-needed development to the country. However, there was a catch. Even though the infrastructure would be built on Nigerian land, Shell would own and operate it, giving them control of the flow of oil and a significant portion of the country's economy. With 95% of Nigeria's exports being oil, it makes up 40% of its total economy. With control over the flow of oil, Shell was able to oversee almost half of Nigeria's total cash flow. This gave the company unparalleled influence over the nation as a whole. It was a genius business move. If Nigeria tried to change the deal and take back control of their own oil, Shell and any other oil company could halt extraction completely, decimating the entire country's economy. But it doesn't stop there. Shell also had powerful connections to British and Dutch families, as well as major banks, which gave them even more leverage over the country. They could tell other big companies to pull out their investments in Nigeria, thus stripping the country of everything, strangling the economy, and making it even more dependent on the company. This type of control over a foreign nation has serious consequences. It leads to a loss of autonomy and control for the targeted nation and puts it at the mercy of the company's decisions and actions. Shell didn't care for the severe impact its actions had on the local population in Nigeria. The company's actions polluted the main source of drinking water, causing health risks and making it impossible for farmers to work their land. Despite protests from the affected community, Shell allegedly used its influence with the government to silence opposition and suppress protests through military force. This led to even more pain and suffering for the Nigerian people. The Nigerian people have suffered for decades as a result of this control, with environmental devastation, human rights abuses, and corruption being just a few of the issues that have plagued the country. It's important to remember that this type of control is not exclusive to Nigeria. Many other countries around the world have fallen victim to the same type of takeover by foreign companies, particularly in the oil industry. And as long as there is a demand for oil, this type of control will continue to be a problem. So, what can be done to prevent this type of takeover? The answer is not an easy one. It requires a combination of efforts from the government, international organizations, and the public. The government must take steps to protect its own resources and economy, and international organizations must hold companies accountable for their actions in foreign nations. As consumers, we also have a responsibility to be aware of the products we are purchasing and their impact on the countries they are sourced from. In conclusion, the control that Shell has over Nigeria is a prime example of the negative impact that foreign companies can have on countries.